Jim steps out of this kind of imaginary what if situation back into his own reality, and he has to face another really tough situation.
And you're locked into another episode of the Unlimited Podcast. My name is Josh, and it has been a very productive day. We've got a lot done so far. We are marinating pork chops. We are doing grocery shopping. We are getting ready for more summer grilling. You know, when you have the grill, it kind of changes your perspective. You feel like you have arrived, in a sense, as a man anyway. And you have just I feel like I need the apron like Kiss the Cook or something like that. But we're trying to slowly but surely, use the grill because we're trying to make that propane last as long as possible before we have to refill it. But Becca has been wanting to get into all the flowery stuff because it is time to plant. And Becca, you want your rosemary bush back, don't you?
I do. I want my rosemary bush. We had, back around Christmas, we had a really bad storm for us where the temperatures just got so low and it killed my rosemary bush. So I want another one. It's time.
Yeah, that frost and the freeze it did a number on everything. We've only, for those of you who don't know, we're not green thumb people.
No.
At least I know I'm not. We've only successfully had grown two things. That is a little bit of tomatoes and rosemary, which we didn't actually have to grow. We just kept it alive for however long that we could.
To me, that's winning.
It
just
is
keeping it alive. I wish that I just knew all about plants, but I don't. I like plants, but I don't care enough to really research how to take care of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll focus on the grilling. You focus on the planting. We'll both have our respective places in the backyard.
That works.
Well, we are excited. We have a guest with us today. They are an author and they specialize more so in fan fiction. Before we bring them on, Becca, we all remember they're going through fan fiction, don't we? We either wrote it, we read it. During the time that I found fan fiction, it was Pokemon, a lot of the anime-based stuff, and some of the fan fiction. There were different Pokemon adventures going on, and you catch my drift. But enough about that. Again, as I said, we have an author who specializes in fan fiction, and that is Miss D.T. Powell. Hey, how you doing today?
Welcome.
Good. How are you all?
Oh, sorry, I had you on mute.
Sorry.
No,
I'm doing
no,
well. How are you?
Good. Well, we are super excited to have you with us today, and to have our audience know more about you, and to talk about our topic or our series that we'll be discussing here in a little bit. But we're going to kick things off with having our audience get to know you a little bit more. So, Rebecca, I'm going to go ahead and let you do all of the interview this time.
Oh, good. Past couple of times, Josh has been doing most of it.
All right, Rebecca, so go ahead and begin.
Yeah, so first off, we would love to just hear about sort of your background. How did you grow up? What got you into fan fiction?
Oh, that's actually a really long story. I got to do a guest blog post for somebody else earlier this year on that, actually, and it tells the whole story. But the really short version, when I was 9, I found a story that just stuck with me, and it has ever since. But in it, there was this one character that I hated so much, like literally hated. But he did die. Well, sort of, he died at the end of the first season of this show. Okay, so I'm 9. I'm super happy about this, right? Because I hate this guy. you've had characters you just hate. Okay, well, this
Oh
was
yeah.
one of them for me. But come season two, he shows up again. I was so mad. I literally said, I was like 9 or 10 at the time. I literally said, why can't he just stay dead? I hated him that much. I literally wanted him dead. But over the next 3 years or so, which was actually 3 years my time and 3 years story time, a lot of stuff happened. And we've all seen these redemption arcs that we just absolutely love. And this was one of them. And he went through this redemption arc, and I did not know how to respond to that because it was somebody I hated. So how do you respond to that? You're a kid, you don't understand that. But in seeing that illustration of how someone can be so awful and do these despicable things and then come to a place of being good, heroic, you know what I mean? It really hit me really hard and showed me a really potent illustration of how God saw me as a sinner and how he changed my heart. And that illustration just literally changed my life. I was saved when I was 4, but as a 4-year-old, you don't commit all these atrocious sins and all of
Yeah.
that. You just
If,
don't.
if you have, you've set the world record.
Yeah. But yeah, most young kids, salvation to them is, some of them may understand, I'm going to go to heaven. I'm
Uh-huh.
not going to go to hell because of
Yeah.
this, and that's a great place to start. But it beyond that, to a lot of especially second and third generation Christians, it just doesn't mean as much because
Mm.
you didn't get pulled out of a life where you already knew you were in trouble.
Yeah.
So for me, keeping that illustration close made salvation very personal for me. And that I actually wrote my first piece of fan fiction when I was about 12, right after that incident. So for me, it was something really personal, and it was a way, well, still is, a way to commemorate and celebrate my salvation. So that's how I got into fan fiction.
Man, that's fantastic. I
Wow.
love that story. That's great.
Yeah. What a great way to get into that. I know I started reading fan fiction and writing when I think it was in middle school. And yeah, I was just like hungry for more of the story. And that's how I ended up, I don't know how I found it, but I ended up finding fan fiction and I was like, yay, wow, it's like stories that I never knew could happen with some of my favorite characters.
Hmm.
So it's really exciting.
Yeah. I actually, that was such a driving force for me that I went to college for an art degree because I wanted to be able to show people some of that piece of wonder that had been just sparked in me. But I kind of flunked out of the art program. I didn't fail or anything, but I wasn't up to par for their standards. You know what I mean? They have to
Yeah.
pick and choose who they mentor, and they have limited resources. So I actually got kicked out of the art program, and I tried all kinds of things. I tried video editing, I tried music, I tried painting, I tried all kinds of things, and they just didn't work. So when I got out of college, I got a business degree, and I was unemployed for about 4 months. And in those 4 months, I realized that there was one medium I had not tried yet. So, just excluding the bits and pieces of fan fiction I had written over the years, it didn't dawn on me that this was an option. So, just one day, I picked up a pen and started writing my first, like, real start to finish noveling fan fiction. And I wrote it in 9 months. And I've not stopped since.
That's awesome. So is that what you do for work now?
I do write full time. I do have a lot of original stuff for financial reasons, I do original work, but I have several ongoing fan fiction stories. I've got two novel length works and a short story collection at the moment, and I do short stories here and there. So I have about 20, I think I'm up to 23 entries so far, something like that. But yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. What a way to find, oh, your passion and just go for it. That's awesome. Yeah. Josh, it'd be nice if I could see all of the question
Yep,
on our little
it
list.
would be nice, and I'm gonna make that happen for you right now.
Ah, fabulous. Um, so let's see. Yeah, so tell us a little bit how you think fan fiction differs from an original story, and why do you lean heavily on fan fiction?
Well, the biggest difference between fan fiction and original fiction is that with fan fiction, you already have your character, your world, and sometimes even your plot is already made for you. So you don't have to sit down and make all of it from scratch like you would for original fiction, which, trust me, it takes a lot of time, especially world and plot. Characters, depending on the characters, isn't as hard. But the way I like to explain it to people is I tell them fan fiction is spending time with old friends and original fiction is spending time with new friends.
That's a great way to look
Yeah,
at it.
that
I love
I've
that.
never heard that analogy. I mean, it's true. I mean, yeah.
Hmm. Yep,
But
that's awesome.
yeah. So I stick with a mix of fan fiction and original fiction. Part of it, I like to use my fan fiction actually as a warm up for going into my original fiction because for me, it's a place that I really want to go to start with. And it's people I already know and love. So spending some time with them before I get into something that I'm not as familiar with, it's a lot more comfortable for one. Two, it gets me in the right mindset. And three, again, it takes me back to that place of remembering who I am and why I'm here. So that's why I choose to continue to do both.
Very cool. I love what you said about um, the sort of old friends, new friends, but then also using fan fiction as kind of like a warm up because you almost need like to get your creative juices flowing sometimes. You just need to spend some time with old friends creating new versions of the story. So that's really fun. I love that. So how do you communicate faith in your writings, if at all?
It happens in several different ways. Sometimes it's pretty literal because there are Christian characters in the narrative. So on occasion they will talk about Christianity or faith, not anything super lengthy, but it does get brought up. So sometimes it's literal. Sometimes it's very not literal. I just wrote a fantasy piece. It's high fantasy. So it's not set in this world, it's set in another world. This is an original piece, by the way.
So high
Um,
fantasy, as an aside, real quick, what would you consider high fantasy?
High fantasy is fantasy that does not take place in this world. So it would just take place in another world. So
Okay,
fantasy that takes place in this world is considered low fantasy as opposed to high fantasy.
interesting.
But the high fantasy piece that I wrote, they're in a different world and they don't have the same religious systems that we do. So obviously it's not going to be like a one-to-one comparison or anything like that. But there is a clear distinction between the forces of good, the forces of evil, and like things like, murder and stealing and stuff like that are considered wrong. And things like mercy and hope and faith are really celebrated. So you get to see a less literal interpretation there. But even when I'm writing a piece that's from a perspective that is entirely like diametrically opposed to my own, I wrote a fan fiction short story. It's probably been 3 or 4 years ago now, but it was from the perspective of a woman who literally worshipped like a demon who like claimed to be some sort of god or whatever. But the piece was really intense to write. Like for me, it was hard to write that because that's not who I am, but it is who she was. So we went with that. But even with that piece, my worldview still surrounds it. So instead of celebrating what she's doing, we see it in a light that is very tragic, very much not encouraged. And readers are left knowing they don't want to do that. So it's kind of like showing a negative example, but keeping the emphasis away from, um, highlighting what they're doing, and you don't show it in a positive light. It's shown in a light appropriate to my worldview. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Sometimes that's good, to get a different perspective, to
Mhm.
write from that sort of negative worldview, what we see as, this is not healthy, it's not
Mhm.
good. But to get into the mind of someone, it reminds me actually of C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters. It kind of the same way. Have you read those?
I have,
Either?
yeah. I got to
Yeah.
read those, probably 15 or so years ago when I was like a
Classic.
teenager. But I went through them with my father and my sister, and they were really,
Mm.
really great.
Yeah, yeah, they are. It's I love C.S. Lewis though in general. Like he's awesome. Um so yeah, that's really cool. 'Cause yeah, sometimes it is good to look at a different view. Um
And
mhm.
I feel like too doing that really humanizes people who don't have the same view as you,
Uh,
because it's so easy to just drop a generalization and say they don't believe what I am, so I'm not gonna pay any attention to them. Or not people fall into the trap, especially Christians fall into the trap of not treating people who believe otherwise as well as they should. So it just
yeah.
really helps with empathy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think yeah, and on the same lines of empathy, realizing that someone else, we all have pretty similar thought processes. Not everyone, but like we are all susceptible to lying, to adultery, to cheating on a test, to whatever it is, to witchcraft, to, we could easily fall into all of those things. And yeah, I think it makes us realize our own humanity and how broken we still are, even though we are saved by Jesus, thank God. But all of those temptations are still there. We're not any better than anybody else, which is really easy to fall into that. I know I've fallen into that at times.
Yeah, and sometimes we don't even realize we've done it.
Yeah, exactly. Hmm. Yeah. So I know this is always really, really hard, but
And I
what
did 3 this time, didn't do 5.
Oh, it,
so
it actually was the easiest question for me
oh
Oh,
too.
okay,
great.
that's
So
great.
you're fine.
Yay, first time.
Yeah, so what are your top 3 animated um movies or shows?
For me, all three were shows. The very first one is the story that I encountered when I was a kid. It's called Star Blazers. It's actually known as Space Battleship Yamato in Japan. That's number one. Number two would be Trollhunters, which we're going to talk about today. Three is Avatar: The Last Airbender.
So
So
good.
good.
So good.
Yeah, for those of you who have not seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, or ATLA, for those of you who love to abbreviate, um, sit down, get Paramount Plus, get the DVD, the Blu-ray, whatever, dedicate time. You will not be disappointed. I heard or read that the an animated movie is in the works
Oh, I thought they
for.
were like redoing the whole show or no. No, you're right. It was an animated movie. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, so
Yeah.
that's very exciting. Um,
Hope they do it right. Unlike the other movies that we got.
what
Or
was it?
movie.
The
The
movie that shall not be named.
Mandalorian.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Man, you know what's funny is I saw that movie first, and I was like, I mean, it's an okay movie. It wasn't like amazing. And then we watched the show, and I was like, oh yeah, no, the show is way better.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Fortunately, I've never seen the live action movie. I've only heard and I've seen screenshots, but I refuse to watch it. So,
Yeah, you're not missing anything.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, we will be talking about Trollhunters. For our viewers, if you haven't seen Trollhunters, it is a Netflix original from Dream. It's on Netflix. It's from DreamWorks. Sorry. Yeah,
Netflix purchased it and says it's their
there we go.
original, but
Yeah.
yeah.
that's a lie.
Um, but it is part of kind of like the same universe because you have troll hunters, you have the wizards, and you also have Three Below, which are all encompassed by Tales of Arcadia or Tales from Arcadia. So, why did you choose this particular series for us to talk about? What draws you to it?
Well, the first reason I chose this one and not my first favorite is my actual favorite show you would be hard pressed to find, and it's really long. So I chose this one because it's you've mentioned that you had Netflix, so I figured it was going to be accessible for you. But
Yes.
also, just this story is one that I have watched all of Troll Hunters, which is like 3 seasons long, probably about 8 times,
Oh,
and
wow.
every time I watch it, I absolutely love it. The characters are so well made, amazing, the way that they interact with each other, just all of these relationships, even there's big friendships in this show, and I absolutely adore them. But actually, my favorite character in this show reminds me a lot of the character from my favorite show, who made a real impression on me when I was a kid. So that's a couple of the really big reasons why I chose this show.
Awesome. Well, while we're talking about the characters themselves, let's get into that to start the conversation. But before we do that, Troll Hunters, it is, and I had to give you a synopsis. It is about a trio of teens who enter into the world of trolls to fight mythical spiritual battles, and they are trying to defeat, well, there's different enemies. There's changelings. There's the Garmon, um,
Gunmar?
Gunmar,
Yeah.
and then Morgana. The last in that series. But that's how I would describe it. The short and sweet of it. I didn't pull up the synopsis for this, unfortunately.
It's a coming
To
of age story too,
Yes,
really.
honestly though, I would say that. But we have our main character who is Jim, and when we see him, it's he's a very good son. He's making breakfast for
Yeah.
his mom. He's at the door because his mom works late nights in the hospital. When I first saw Toady, that character, I wasn't expecting much. I was like, he's a funny sidekick. He's not going to really have any development. He's just there for comedic support, which he does offer that, but so much more. What I loved about this series is that it took time to develop like the characters that you thought were unlikely in one of the main antagonists has a redemption arc, which is very surprising. Rebecca, regarding characters, what was surprising or what did you like in that regard?
Uh, a lot. I really liked the character development. It's like everyone had, I don't know, their time in the spotlight, I guess. I did really enjoy to all the things that you said, Josh. I would echo, but to add to it, I would say I really enjoyed Eli and oh my gosh, what was the guy's name?
Oh,
The blonde hair
the
who
bully.
says butt munch all the time. I hate
Steve.
that.
Yeah,
Steve,
Steve. Yeah,
Steve, Steve and Eli, they're like mortal enemies at first, and then they're actually okay. They like get to actually know each other, and they get to form a little friendship, which was really cool to be able to see that, like, like we were talking about earlier with humanizing bullies or just people in general, and um, we're all dealing with stuff. And so it was nice to see that they could come together. So that was a really neat character development, I thought.
and the kind of the culmination of all these characters that they're enemies or they're not really in their cliques and whatnot, but it's an unlikely group of friends, honestly, that ends up coming out of it. Again, we have the main trio of Jim, Toadie, and Claire is the love interest. But I love her development as well. She actually ends up becoming part of the and I'll just think of the name, the Troll Patrol. Um, sounds really weird. The Troll Squad, whatever.
The
That
Troll Hunters? Is that what you're trying to say?
that's good. I know. I wish I had thought of that. Yeah. Yeah, the Troll Hunters. Um, but going back to that whole development again, nobody stays just their generalized or anticipated like character. Again, Steve has a redemption arc. Walter, who is like the changeling teacher, he has a redemption arc, and I apologize. I'll
Here, I'll
get to that
plug
in
it
a
back
minute.
in.
Yes, thank you. Um, he has a redemption arc. When I first saw Walter, who is Jim's like history teacher at first, I kind of suspected something, but not much in that first episode. Um, the relationship between him and Barbara, Jim's mom, was completely. I was not. There were a lot of unexpected scenes in this series, which is something I really enjoyed. Um, yeah, for you, what were some of your favorites of the series?
Uh, some of my favorites. I tend to like some stuff that a lot of people don't really think about being significant, I guess. So for me, uh, I had a favorite episode. It was actually in season 3. It was episode 5. It's called "The Exorcism of Claire Nunez." So if you hear the name of the episode without any context, you just kind of I kind of
Yeah.
get a side eye because they're like, "What?" But it for me, it shows so much, a lot of the character development, not just for Jim, although with Jim we see his willingness to go and do these seemingly impossible things in order to help Claire. And it's not this like sappy romance, which I really, really appreciated.
Yes.
It's a practical romance. It's him he's literally going into darkness to bring her soul back because her soul's kind of been kicked out a little bit by Morgana. Um, she was crazy, but yeah, we see that aspect. We see Jim, but my favorite aspect of that episode is actually how much we see Walter Strickler has changed as a person. We see instead of like in season 1 where he's trying to kind of force himself into the situation and maneuver his way into Barbara's good graces in order to get to Jim. Now he is on Jim's side, and that means that he's not acting like selfishly so much anymore. He has his moments, but instead of trying to manipulate the situation and make Barbara like him, instead he's standing back and he's saying if she decides that she wants this, that's fine. And just really putting what he wants on the back burner. And to me, that's a huge moment because he wouldn't have done that in season one. He just wouldn't have. Uh, and my actually favorite quote is from that episode too. Morgana, there's a really complicated history between Morgana and the changelings, which is what Walter Strickler really is. He's a troll in human form. And he uses it a lot for deceptive purposes, not always, but he essentially faces down Morgana and he tells her when she offers him uh, Barbara's love in exchange for a favor, he tells her no. And let me scroll down here to where I wrote this down because I'm not going to say it right if I don't. Uh, he looks at her and he says, I don't deny who you are, but I choose to believe there's a better way. So he steps away from them. And I absolutely love that moment. It was just one of the greatest moments of the series for me. Though there's so many other great moments. Another one I really loved was in season 2. It's an episode called Unbecoming, where Jim gets to see what would happen if he was not the troll hunter.
Oh yes,
Yeah, I
yes, I
remember
remember
that
that.
one.
And it's kind of like a really twisted version of It's a Wonderful Life, I guess. But it's
Yeah, in a
really,
way.
kind of, it's got that idea of, what if I weren't? And he comes to the conclusion that he is the troll hunter. He says, amulet or not, I'm the troll hunter. And with him not having the amulet in this particular situation, like the whole town ends up in flames and destroyed and all of
Yes.
this. But in the end, he decides that he is still going to fight. And he gets this little kind of visitation from Merlin, who's the one who actually made the Troll Hunter amulet. But Merlin says to him, he gives him a summary of the situation. He says, Gunmar is free, Troll Market is in peril, and of all creatures in our worlds, I chose you. Now show them why. And then Jim steps out of this kind of imaginary what if situation back into his own reality. And he has to face another really tough situation that he really shouldn't be in because it's unfair and he's been thrust into it not of his own doing. But
Which we
that
later
was a
find
big
out
moment.
why, because
Yeah.
someone in the party had betrayed everyone
Mm-hmm.
else's trust. So, yeah.
Yeah. But we got to really see what Jim was made of there. And
Mm-hmm.
that said a lot, which I think really went into, those final few episodes where just kind of everything happened. So,
Yeah.
which I
Yeah.
really did love those last couple episodes.
Yeah,
They
they
were
Absolutely.
were
great.
very good.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And while we're on the topic of Jim, let's get to one of our kind of like sub topics, which is Jim and the parallels to Jesus. Now, I remember when you mentioned this, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not kind of like seeing those yet. They really came to fruition towards the end of this series. Again, we had, from your notes here, we had the balancing of two opposing natures in order to defeat death. Um, uh, I didn't really think about this, but Jen is wrongfully accused of the crime and is brought to trial in the troll market, and um, so that directly paralleled to Jesus being brought before trial, Pontius Pilate, and being wrongfully accused and being crucified. Um,
And then he was found guilty
hmm,
and sent into this dark pit of
yeah, despair.
whatever it was. And we don't really get to see what happens in there, but he fights himself. Like this creature takes the form of, I don't know, the negative version of him So it's like he defeats that and then he comes up and he is victorious. So that was really interesting.
You also mentioned about the exorcism of Claire Nunez, which again is Jim saving the soul of somebody he loves, just like Christ running after us, because he wants to save our souls, from eternal damnation. Another great one is that when Jim has to decide to become half troll, half human, not a changeling, in order to defeat Morgana, to save his world, the troll world, he's that living sacrifice, but he also becomes a new creation as
Hmm.
well. So I just loved, every parallels like that. What were your thoughts in regards to these numerous parallels between Jim and Christ?
For me, it was just another aspect of the show that just really made me love it even more, because that kind of metaphor, whether or not it was intentional, I don't know. Some of it may have been, some of it may not have been. I don't really, I've not seen it really mentioned anywhere, so I'm pretty confident it was not intentional, if it was. But sometimes even people who don't mean to do that kind of thing end up doing it because it is truth, and truth kind of has a way of coming out in a lot of stuff, even if people don't intend it. But for me, it was just another reason to love it so much, and it means that much more to me because of those parallels. And it whenever I see one, it reminds me of what Jesus did for us, and just makes this story so much more significant.
Yeah, the show is good on its own, right? Like as a story, it's all great. It's just like the icing on the cake when you end up seeing those, religious parallels and the parallels between in Christianity. So I agree. Is really good. All of it is really, really good.
I mean, it sounds like, what we do every week. We don't go into entertainment necessarily looking for a message or parallels, but I mean, it's great when it happens. It's all a part of offering those redemptive analogies, taking this medium and relating it to the gospel. Um, One episode I don't remember what the name was, but I know it was in part three. It's where Jim's mom, Barbara, like has all these memories flooding back, like her time in Troll, and she was injured, and she and how this played out. I was just expecting the typical, like, kind of like, that's funny. You're crazy, mom. Which she Barbara invites Toadie's grandmother and Claire's parents out of the house and
Which is
said,
going really far. I was like, wow,
"Yeah,
okay,
Yeah.
and maybe confront your son first, and not."
yeah.
Um, and she's like, "Well, you need to tell them what they're doing." It's like, "Oh, well, what do you mean?" It's like they are fighting trolls, and you can. That one is about as well as you could expect it. It's like, Laura, you need therapy. I know the great person. And the first the lie that um, kind of Claire comes up with to kind of save face is like, oh,
We're
we're
LARPers.
LARPers, live action role players, and
Yeah.
so we have all these things, but
Which
after,
is a pretty good.
yeah,
Honestly, if you're gonna come
honestly,
up with a cover story, that's a good one.
but over the course of the next few minutes, Jim says, we have to tell them, and they just put on full display. And I was in most series when you see that the parents are oblivious, the outside friends are oblivious. So that this is a really nice change, an unexpected change as well. Um, I love the relationship between Jim and his mom and how that progresses through the series. She's not trying to like coddle him. as opposed to part one in correlation with part three. It's like, what you need to do, you've been my son. It's been you and I for all these years, but I know, you have a bigger purpose than just in, Arcadia. You need to go be the troll hunter. You need to be this person that I'm here for you. You can talk to me. You can tell me anything. Um, the conversations between those two just feel very authentic, and just really honest. So I love that about Jim and his mom. Becca, regarding relationships, aside from what I just explained, um, what were two characters that you enjoyed seeing a building of the relationship with?
Oh my goodness. I really enjoyed, we haven't talked about them at all, which I'm surprised,
Oh,
but I really enjoyed Blinky
oh,
and
yes,
Jim
or
and
Blink K, as
Blink
he, yeah.
Hey. Yes. I really liked getting to know their relationship and seeing how that grew. And he really became sort of a father figure for him, which I will say felt a tiny bit forced at first. As far as like, whoa, I didn't see that. I saw it as more like a mentor, maybe not father figure. But then as the show progressed, after they mentioned it, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, yes, I can definitely see that, for sure. And then I really liked how um, Arg and Toby and their relationship, wingman. That was really fun. And I gotta say, I really like Chomsky. He's one of my favorites. He's just this funny little gnome who doesn't say actual words, and yet you still understand what he's trying to communicate. And he's just a really fun little character who's annoying at first. All the little gnomes are pests apparently, and they're getting into everything. But really, they've got little personalities, and I don't know. Even the things that we consider pests, they matter. They can make a difference. And so I liked seeing Chomsky. He was brave. He went off into the Darklands to see if Enrique was still there, Claire's brother. And yeah, so I those were some of the relationships. I thought it was funny, I gotta say, with Chomsky and his little Barbie, whoever she
Oh,
was,
yes.
and their fake marriage, and they have a baby at the end
Yeah.
that's a peanut. What? It's very funny.
Dad, same question. Two that have been mentioned, or maybe have been mentioned, that you really enjoyed seeing the progression of the relationship between.
Oh man, I really love the two that you all have already mentioned. Barbara and Jim are amazing, and just the fact that she trusts him,
Hmm.
um, and doesn't, you know, it. She is mother and father. She has to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, the fact that she can come to a place of trusting him twice, because she has the first time, and then she has her memories wiped, and then they start to come back, so then she has to trust him again. And that would be hard one time, but doing it twice, to me, oh goodness, that would
Yeah.
be a lot. um and of course, Blinky and Arg are amazing. I absolutely love them. um Another minor relationship that I really liked was Jim and Drawl, actually.
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
The
yes.
two of
they were
them,
great.
I they were so they're pretty much rivals,
Yeah.
because one has the amulet, the other is the son of the former troll hunter.
Yes.
And Jim, essentially, to Drawl, Jim stole his inheritance,
Hmm.
and that's a serious issue. Um, and Drawl pretty much almost kills Jim at one point, in their duel. Actually, probably a couple of times he almost literally kills him. But when Jim defeats him and decides to show him mercy, it's a shame in the troll community to do that. But as Jim keeps saying, he's not a troll. So he doesn't do things the troll way. And Drawl, in shame, goes and lives in Jim's basement. Okay,
As you
that's
do, you know.
hilarious, you know? And Jim's trying to keep his mother from finding out there's a troll living in the basement. I mean, how awkward is that? Because she has
Well,
to go down there
yeah.
sometimes, you know. And he, makes a huge hole in the wall and starts eating random stuff, and he's just like, "Stop that!" But they become these great friends, and Drawl teaches him how to use a sword, how to not get killed when he's fighting other bad trolls, gum gums and stuff like that. So to me, that was a minor relationship that I really liked. But my absolute favorite relationship in the whole show is actually Walter Strickler and Barbara Lake, uh, which is pretty rare for me. I don't like a lot of romance shipping stuff. I can count on one hand the number of romantic relationships that I actually like, and this is one of them. Because again, it wasn't all of this, you know, touchy feely, emotional, everything, emotions dripping everywhere. I can't stand that. So with these two, it starts out as Walter, he's trying to protect himself from Jim. So the way in he sees is, oh, well, if, uh, I start getting involved with his mother and she's sympathetic toward me, and then you have the whole, magic bonding spell thing, if something happens to me, something happens to her. So, oops, you can't hurt me. Okay. That was really selfish and really wrong. And he even hesitates before he does that. So you see that already he's starting to figure out, maybe I shouldn't do this, but he goes ahead and does it. And he later regrets it. Really bad. But at the end of season 1, we have Vendel. I really like Vendel, by the way. Vendel was
I
great.
did
I was so
too.
sad when he went
Yeah.
off the screen. But when Vendel is able to break that bonding spell between Walter and Barbara, uh, Walter didn't have to do that. Okay, I've seen discussions and all this kind of stuff. He probably could have survived the wounds that he had, but she would not have.
Mm-hmm.
So he uh, voluntarily decided to break that. There was maybe a little bit of coercion on the part of him offering to help Jim with, I think it was like polishing Gunmar's eye or something like that, or maybe the birthstone, so he could use it. But again, like I said, he didn't have to do that. And when he leaves at the end of season 1, we start to see some of what he actually thinks. But he doesn't really say a whole lot. And then he just kind of departs and we don't see him for a while. And then he comes back in season 3. And with him and Barbara, Barbara's already been abandoned by one person, her former husband. He went off with his girlfriend and he hasn't been seen since. Okay. So she's got like abandonment issues essentially, which I don't blame her. Okay. That would be tough. But when Walter comes back, that really makes a huge impression on her. And she literally stands there after he shows up again on her doorstep and says, he came back. He didn't abandon her. And he comes back and he tells Jim a little later in the series, I did not come back to help you. I came back to protect her. Mm-hmm. So he had his priorities adjusted during the time that he was away and through the first season, and his heart was in the right place now. So he spends the entire rest of the season trying to get back in her good graces because he knows he messed up really bad. And just the amount of forgiveness that she shows him, to me, is amazing because, again, she didn't have to do that. She could have just kicked him out and said, you tried to kill my son. you did something really dumb that almost got me killed. I'm not talking to you again. And would have been completely justified in doing that. But instead, she gives him a second chance. And it goes from there. But yeah, that's definitely my favorite relationship in the entire show.
Yeah, I just love yeah, that the relationship between Bard and Strickland. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it was an unlikely pairing, I will say, but I mean, I enjoyed that as well. Going back to what you said a moment ago, just to touch on this briefly, where Barbara was married at one point, but the father um, then left with his other girlfriend. It reminded me of the episode where I guess like Jim's father had bought like parts of a bicycle or a Vespa or something, and he said, "Yeah, you said we would put together for like my birthday, and over a period of time." And Blanke gets these parts, and it's like, well, your father didn't, but I think you and I could maybe put this together someday. And that was a really heartwarming moment during that time because he could see the hurt and the emotions that Jim was going through because he doesn't have a father figure. And Becky, you said, yeah, it is, forced, but there are some good moments
Yeah,
in that
for sure.
relationship in that regard. So I really like that.
Yeah, well, it was the feeling of the father figure was a little bit
Yes.
forced. Um, but then yeah, after a while it was like, okay, yeah, I see that.
Yeah, I think it started out a little bit awkward.
Hmm.
Number one, we don't really know these characters very well, but then as you
Yeah.
kind of get to know them and you see, okay, yeah, that works. But
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah, the moment with the Vespa parts was great.
that was it was very good. Hmm.
Wonderful. Um, so just to kind of wrap this up a little bit, we would definitely recommend Troll Hunters. We haven't seen the other two in the series, but there is a Troll Hunters movie. Deb, would you recommend Wizards and Three Below as much as you would recommend Troll Hunters, or are they kind of subpar?
For me, uh, especially with Three Below, it's going to really depend on what your preference is for characters because Three Below does follow Aja and Krell, who
Yes.
showed up in I think maybe one or two episodes in Troll Hunters.
Hmm.
So if you really liked them, you will probably really enjoy Three Below because it's very different. It's kind of a mix of like science fiction and like urban fantasy. That's kind of the mix there, instead of just urban fantasy. Um, because there's aliens and all this kind of stuff. So if you really enjoy that, you will probably really enjoy Three Below. With Wizards, I kind of felt like the story suffered because initially it was supposed to be a lot longer than it was, and it got cut down to about 10 episodes. So a lot of people really felt that the story suffered for that. Now, if you really like comic relief Steve, you will probably absolutely love some moments in that show. Or if you really, really like Dukesy, the waiter, in one or two of the Troll Hunters episodes, he's not really a waiter, just so you know,
Oh,
um, in case that wasn't clear. But if you really enjoyed his character, you'll probably like Wizards anyway. Um, but again, just be aware that the story may not be everything it's supposed to be. And it does incorporate a lot more Arthurian legend,
hmm.
so that's another positive for Wizards. And then, but yeah, that's my summary of the other two series. So they were good. Like there wasn't anything bad in them. Yeah, you can watch them and they're going to be decent. So yeah, I mean, if you want to see the story continue, go for it.
Fantastic. And lastly, you wrote an alternate ending to Troll Hunters as part of your whole fan fiction thing. may not get it away, but what was that process like for you?
Well, for me, the very end of the Tales of Arcadia series is a movie called Rise of the Titans.
Okay.
Um, some of it was great, some of it needed improvement. Uh, but for that, after I watched that movie, I was so dissatisfied with the ending that uh, I sat on my couch and I said, I can do better. So I did.
Okay.
Um, 2 years ago, it's been 2 years ago. I think in June it'll be 2 years. Whenever Rise of the Titans came out, I don't remember precisely, but I sat down and starting either that night or the next night, I started writing an alternate ending fan fiction uh, for Tales of Arcadia. Uh, and it took me 28 days. I wrote 40,000 words in 28 days. And it was great. I absolutely loved it. Of course, I loved what happened with all the characters. Of course, I mean, of course, I love it. I wrote it. I've got to love it, right? Okay. But I posted it over the next 2 or 3 months. It took me about until August to post it because you don't want to post something like that all at once because people aren't going to know about it. It's going to kind of get lost in the shuffle, that kind of thing. So I was really surprised actually when I posted it. Everything else that I've written is for my favorite series, Star Blazers, so Space Battleship Yamato. But this one Trollhunters story has gotten over 30,000 views in the past 2 years. Uh, so a lot of people really loved it. I've had at least 170 reviews, people saying they absolutely loved it. Uh, and to me, it just really showed how far uh, just a hopeful view of things goes. And if you all do decide to watch the movie, I'm not going to discourage you from doing it. But if you decide that you do not like that ending, I would absolutely love for you to read mine. Um,
Yeah. I was gonna
Yeah.
ask,
yeah,
where can you find it?
it is available on fanfiction.net. It is
Okay.
also available on archiveofourown.org. It's called One Petal at a Time. Uh, it's based on something one of the characters in the movie said. You'd have to see it. I don't want to give you any spoilers in case you
Okay.
Okay.
watch it. But it does start uh, probably about 5 minutes before the credits roll. So it takes everything that happened in the movie, but it stops like at the very, very end and keeps going. So instead of taking the movie ending, it adds on and gives you a whole it would probably make the movie about double
Mm,
the length that it was. And I understand that's not feasible for
Yeah.
a big screen thing. That's
mm,
just not.
yeah.
But yeah, if you want to read it, it's on fanfiction.net and or archive of our own. So yeah, it's out there.
All right, fantastic.
Cool.
Well, definitely have enjoyed so much talking with you about troll hunters, getting to know you. If people want to follow you, keep up with what you're doing, where can they follow you?
The best place to follow me is going to be my website, which is www.dtpowellwrites, WRITES.com. And on there, I have a blog that talks about a bunch of different fan fiction topics. You can read some of my original short stories. And big thing, you can sign up for my quarterly newsletter. So you will never have to wonder what I'm doing, what I'm posting, what I'm up to, anything like that. And there's a button towards the top of the screen, or there's also a nice big pop-up that's kind of hard to miss. So that is the best place to follow me. I mean, I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, and you can find links to those pages on my website. But I'm pretty much everywhere online under the username dtill359. So DTILL 359. So that's me.
All right. Well, we would encourage everyone to go check out her website. Again, I've read a few of their things, some great content out there. Until next time, everybody, keep those halos shiny and stay holy, my friends.